Welcome to Akina Pharmacy Speaker Series. Today, we're going to explore the transformative power of high-quality personalized medicine. My name is Bass Girgis. I'm the co-founder of Akina Pharmacy, and I'm thrilled to be your host today. And throughout my journey in healthcare, first as a pharmacist and now leading Akina Compounding Pharmacy, I've been privileged to witness firsthand how personalized medicine can fundamentally change patient outcomes. As a 503A compounding pharmacy, we don't just compound medications, we compound trust, quality, and innovation into every formulation that we create. This series of conversations spotlights providers like Donna, clinical specialists, partners, and subject matter experts to explore the world of compounding care, personalized care, and the best in patient care. In today's episode, we're going to be exploring empowering patients to take control of their health through functional medicine and lifestyle optimization. We're going to dive deep into how personalized medicine is reshaping the landscape of patient care. And today, we're joined by Donna Figueroa, functional medicine nurse practitioner and founder of Midlife Midwife Functional Health here in Leesburg, Virginia. Donna brings invaluable expertise to our discussion today about the future of individualized patient care. Donna, thank you for joining us today. And just to kick us off here, let's just start off with your journey, right? Tell us a little bit about what led you to become such a passionate advocate for personalized medicine in your practice.
First of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me. My personal journey. So healthcare is actually a second career for me. I spent 20 years in higher education, actually, until I decided that I actually fell in love with my pregnancy is what happened. I had a lovely pregnancy, fell in love with being pregnant, fell in love with my midwife, and decided that's what I want to do. I want to be a midwife, just like you. And so in my 40s, I decided to go back to school, and I became a certified nurse midwife, had a passion for pregnancy and childbirth and women's health, learned so much, was very pleased with that profession. Although I caught my 40 babies during my education to get certified as a nurse midwife, I realized that I never ever wanted to work in a hospital again as long as I lived. I just felt the hospital was very stifling to me, and it wasn't where birth belonged. I thought that birth was a natural process. And I wasn't really cut out because nursing was a second career for me and I was late to the game. I wasn't a good fit for doing out of hospital births, home births or birth center, because I didn't have that real strong nursing background to fall back on outside the hospital environment. I worked as a nurse practitioner, as a certified nurse midwife in clinic only. I covered women's health, the entire gamut except for delivery. So I worked with women with all kinds of menstrual problems, pelvic pain, sexual problems, as well as pregnancy, postpartum, lactation, all the things. Loved it, fell in love with it, completely passionate about helping women until I hit the brick wall called perimenopause. And I was in my late 40s, early 50s, and just had all the things that you hear about, the hot flashes, the joint aches, inability to sleep well. My digestion was off for the first time in my life. My hair, skin, and nails were suffering. Everything was dry and brittle and lackluster. And I just was falling apart and realized as I was seeking care for my own primary care and GYN that the system was not designed to deal with the natural process of menopause in a woman's body. Our system is designed for basically sick care. And not really designed for well care. And just like pregnancy, where I was disenamored with it taking place in a medical environment, pregnancy is natural, childbirth is natural. I felt menopause was natural. And I just wasn't getting the answers in healthcare. So I started examining where else I could get some relief. And I found myself working with a functional nurse practitioner in a chiropractor's office. I did get some answers. And I didn't realize it was functional medicine or personalized medicine. I didn't know what the label was at the time. I just knew it was different and it was off the grid and I was getting help and getting better. So by using a lot of natural modalities and having a really holistic view of my health and not kind of a siloed view of my health and going to the, orthopedist for the joint pain and going to my primary care, go to a sleep study because you can't sleep and, go to the dermatologist because your skin is getting wrinkly. That's all siloed healthcare. Instead, I was in one place looking at the whole person and looking at what I could do with my lifestyle and with my nutrition and all the other modalities that were at my fingertips. And I kind of helped myself with guidance. And it wasn't until I was on the other side of it and doing much better that I realized it was really functional medicine. And as I came through that journey, I wound up, instead of having double hip replacement surgery, which my practitioners had recommended, I had stem cells injected in my hips and worked with them with physical therapy and a low inflammation diet. And I did some deep dives medically with some labs and discovered I had a heavy metal toxicity I needed to take care of. I had some food sensitivities I needed to take care of. When I cleared out all this dead wood, even though I was still going through menopause, my hormones started to become more in balance just from making the changes. And I wound up dropping 40 pounds. I didn't even go on hormones at that time. Just from all the changes I made in my lifestyle, 40 pounds melted off. I was able to sleep at night without pain meds for the first time in 5 or 6 years. My hair, skin, and nails got better. My eyesight improved. And I learned later through labs that I had set my biological clock back by 14 years and went surfing on my 60th birthday to celebrate. So
Yeah,
that's the path I've come. Once I hit that point, I realized I got to do this for others. I shouldn't be the only one surfing at 60. It'll be very lonely. So I decided I wanted to dedicate my career and the rest of my professional life to helping others find that health optimization, that health transformation in their lives so that they can live longer, healthier, happier lives. And it's not just about living longer and getting to the finish line. It's about running over it with gusto and a glass of wine in one hand, and a big baguette, French baguette in the other, and just having a time of your life. That's what I want to see for others, be able to walk the cobblestone streets of Europe and go travel the volcanoes and the Egyptian pyramids while we're still healthy. I think that's important. I don't want to spend my 70s and 80s, decrepit in a house dependent on my son or someone else to take care of me. I want to be out there living my life. That's what I've done. I went out and I got certified in functional medicine, learned more about it, built a business around it. And that's what I do now. I serve people. Although I'm a midwife by nature and by profession, I'm still a certified nurse midwife. Instead of delivering babies now, I deliver health transformation. And I don't work just with women. I work with anyone who wants to work with me or who needs that kind of transition in their life.
I like that. I don't deliver babies. I deliver health transformation.
Yeah.
That's a good tagline right there, definitely. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. That's a really compelling story. And for me, it raises a lot of questions that I think we can get valuable insight from, me as a healthcare provider and as, let's say, a patient potentially, right? Or someone that's looking to optimize lifestyle. And ultimately, the goal here, it sounds like, is to live the most vital life possible for as long as we're here, right? And just like you said, sprint through the finish line versus, crawl, beaten
Be
and
pushed in
bruised.
a
And
wheelchair. Yeah. That's not
yeah.
what I want to do.
And I think the big reason why your story is like really compelling is because, you did the work yourself. You discovered it yourself. You learned it in and out yourself. And then you said, you know what? I feel a responsibility and obligation to share this with other people so that they can get out of the sick system, as you described it, and sort of take matters and their health into their own hands and approach it instead of in such a siloed way, right? We have so many specialists that are not communicating. You have a specialist and then a subspecialist. There's a specialist for the specialist, right?
Patients come to me all the time with these labs, right? And they say, "Oh, my primary care did these labs, and my endocrinologist did these labs, and my cardiologist did these labs." And they were all done within like a couple weeks of each other, and it's all the same labs.
Yeah.
And you're like,
Yeah.
aren't they
Yeah.
communicating?
Yeah. No, I guess so. They got jabbed a couple times without having to. And then, it also doesn't lead to a better outcome either. So, you mentioned that you fell in love with I'm going to go like back to the beginning of the conversation, right? And something that I'm just really curious about here. You said you fell in love with your pregnancy and the midwife, the experience there as well. And that kind of took you or drew you towards healthcare in the first place. Can you share, if you don't mind, just a little bit about what you fell in love with in that experience? Like, what was it? What did you realize then, or what paradigm shift was there that kind of moved you into that direction?
I mean, growing life inside you is just something incredible.
Mm.
It's unfortunate that men don't get to experience that. That is probably one of the most amazing and beautiful and just breathtaking experiences that a woman can have, is to think that just, from two people that come together grows another person inside one of them, and you develop that baby inside you. I mean, it can bring tears to my eyes just thinking about it. It's just absolutely astounding how powerful our bodies are. And then you start to realize that everything that is part of that child that you're growing, that being, comes from my own body. And what is my body made up of? It's made up of what I'm eating, what I'm breathing, what I'm absorbing. It's just me. There's no, outside force that is developing that baby, and it's growing and it's developing so many intricate pieces, the skin and the organs and the teeth and the hair and the genitals, and, that growing into a complete person. It's like miraculous. It's the most amazing thing there is. It really is. When you think about all the different species and animals and on the planet that do that, it's just incredible how, it's so specific to our own species to develop a small human. And then as a practitioner, to watch other women do that, it's such an honor to be by their side and to understand what's going on in their body, to be able to explain that to them, to be able to put that into terms. And oftentimes working with pregnant women is really special, especially first-time pregnancies. You have to remind them, you are growing a baby. You're not sick and there's nothing wrong with you, but it doesn't mean it's symptom-free, right? You've got this little human developing inside you, and it's inside your abdominal cavity that is surrounded by all your vital organs. And so you're going to have some symptoms.
Yeah.
That little guy or gal in there is banging into your intestines and pushing their head up on your lungs and kicking their butt down by your bladder, or if they're, already head down, the head is pressing into the bladder. I mean, of course you're going to have all these symptoms. And when you start explaining this to people, showing them pictures of what the baby looks like inside of them, it's like mind blowing that our bodies can do this. So that's always just amazed me. I'm still a midwife at heart. The word midwife means with woman, actually. And so I do feel like I practice with women, and I do practice with men as well, because you know what happens, Bass? You work with women and they bring you their husbands and their sons and their brothers and their fathers and everybody else in their family. So, it's all good.
Yeah.
And it's just, I
That's
don't know if I
incredible.
answered your question, but I tried.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, absolutely. There's something, I mean, you're describing something miraculous, right?
Yeah, it's magical.
Literally like creating life, right? We're going from almost nothing to this living,
Yeah.
breathing, thinking, conscious human being that loves you and you love them back, right? And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's pretty incredible. I remember the first time I just heard the heartbeat of my son in the first ultrasound. And I'm like, the fact that it was such a moving experience for me as a man, kind of like standing almost on the sideline listening to it, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, like what if that heartbeat was like inside your body and you're nourishing this thing, right? It's
Yeah.
literally 100% dependent on you in every form and fashion, right?
Yeah, and even when
So
they're born, when
yeah,
you move into breastfeeding and lactation, it's like, I am still nourishing this little being, and you don't have to pack anything in a bag. You can go anywhere you want. You've got your nourishment for your baby. And it's
your
just,
body.
yeah, your
Yeah,
body provides it. It's just absolutely incredible. And even to this day, they continue to grow. My son is 26. I only had
yeah.
one. He's 26, and I look at him today and I'm like, geez, Louise. I mean, this guy, he's 6 feet tall and he wears size 14 shoe. He's a big, and I'm like, that guy was a little baby inside my belly one day. That's incredible.
I'm sure you've gotten this question before. Does he play basketball?
He
Is that his
likes to
thing?
play basketball, but he doesn't play it. He's not a big team sport person. He's a runner. He likes to running and hiking, and he's very active. But and he plays basketball on his own or in pickup games, but not unofficially. No.
Good stuff. So, kind of going back into, your experience within the healthcare system, and you talked a little bit about how you advocated for yourself, right? So, I kind of want to dig into that just a little bit more. If we're talking to that patient that doesn't even know where to start, right? You mentioned that you ended up in a functional medicine a practitioner's office that was inside a chiropractic off, right? An office
Yeah.
of a chiropractor.
She was in a
Uh,
chiropractic office.
yeah. So can you tell us a little bit, like during that time when you hit that perimenopause stage of your life? You said it hit you kind of like a brick wall, out of nowhere, and then you have this um like sea of symptoms, right, that you haven't experienced before, and now you need to confront this reality, this new reality. Like, why didn't you just go to your general practitioner, and like what did you have to do research? Did you speak to a friend? Like, what convinced you to go that route to functional medicine? What were you looking for, and how can we educate people on what they should be looking for when they're confronted with the same reality, let's say?
I think I did go to my general practitioner originally, and I was kind of blown off, like, what do you expect? You're getting older, you're almost 50 years old, or you are 50 years old. We start to get aches and pains. It's more difficult to sleep, go to bed earlier, don't drink so much wine, eat better. Very, very vague generalizations of just, take care of you. Because they would run labs and say, everything's fine, it looks good, everything's good. You're in good health. This is just normal aging. And I had trouble accepting that. I just thought, this can't be. I had a grandmother who lived to be 100, and, she was active almost till the day she died. And my sister used to ask her all the time, does anything hurt you? Because when she was like in her 90s, we were already starting to feel the aches and pains. And she would say, no, I feel fine. And we were like, how come we're suffering at 45, 50, 55 years old? So, I think I went to my practitioner and they told me, it's, you're healthy. It's fine. This is just part of aging. And I just couldn't accept that. So I started doing research, and I thought to myself, okay, what's going on? First of all, I'm medically educated, right? I have an advanced degree in nursing, a bachelor's and a master's in nursing. And I'm a licensed nurse practitioner, and I've had medical education. And the amount I think that we covered in menopause, even in my women's health focused program, which is midwifery, which is 100% women's health, the amount we covered on menopause, is this big. I mean, it's like, especially in midwifery, a lot of it was prenatal, intrapartum, which is during the birth process, and postpartum and lactation. That's the majority of what we cover. And the menopause was like this big. So I didn't know that much about menopause, and I hadn't been there yet. So I started doing research, and I thought to myself, well, what is going on? Okay, I know my estrogen's taking a dive. So I started researching what symptoms estrogen can cause. And I learned that estrogen is an anti-inflammatory. And so you can have symptoms of inflammation. And I started to learn about how in menopause, our ovaries stop producing our hormones, but our adrenals are supposed to pick up and produce them. But our adrenal glands also produce our stress hormones. And so if our adrenal glands are already overstressed, I can't imagine why anyone would be stressed in this world, but most of us are. And so our
Yeah.
adrenal glands are already, plugging along, trying to keep up with the stress response. And now we're giving them a new responsibility. You got to produce these sex hormones too. And so I started to realize there's something to this. Like, it's not just that it's menopause, it's that we're overstressed and our body can't keep up with the change that needs to happen. And if we were, I think, in an ideal world, it would be a lot smoother, but we're not in an ideal world. We're in a world that's filled with stress. Number one, we're all overworked and over committed and undersleeping. And we are in a world with toxins all around us. We have hormone disruptors around us, plastics, heavy metals, radiation, jet fuel, all the things, the forever chemicals, the PFAS, they're just all around us, and they're disrupting our hormones. They're disrupting our sleep. And sleep is when we need to heal. And I just started putting the pieces together, and I started seeing more of the holistic picture, even though I didn't know it was called functional medicine until I got to the other side of the tunnel. And then I actually met someone at a conference who mentioned it to me and said, you need to go to the Institute for Functional Medicine website, because I was asking some questions. And he said, this is functional medicine. And I said, what's functional medicine? And I went to the Institute for Functional Medicine medicine website, and I realized, oh, this is what I'm doing. And this is how I want to practice. Wow, there's other people in this world that actually practice like this. And it's a thing, and it has a name, and it has a mission. And so I started learning more about it. And I realized that what functional medicine does is it sees the body as one system with many different functions, as opposed to a body with siloed systems. So we see functional medicine that all the functions are integrated. It's very integrated. It's very holistic. We look at the being as one, and we look at how the outside forces, the endogenous forces or the exogenous forces from outside the body act on the body. There's two different kinds of factors from outside, right? There's the ones we can modify and there's ones we can't modify. We can't modify our genes. We can't always modify exactly where we're living, but we can modify a lot of things about our lifestyle, about our diet, about how often and when and how we exercise, about how we sleep, how we support our sleep, how we manage stress, how we view ourselves or get a sense of community, how we, all of these play a role in what happens inside our body. And it's all really important. And so when I practice with patients, I include all of these different factors and modalities in our healing. And we use very little prescription medications. The ones we use are the ones we might get from a pharmacy like yours, like, hormones to help balance hormones. And we might even get some, melatonin, sex hormones, melatonin, LDN, which is low dose naltrexone. We use a lot of off-label or lower dose pharmaceuticals when we do use pharmaceuticals. And so we use them very judiciously and in a much more intentional way, as opposed to one size fits all Band-Aid solutions, which is what we see in traditional medicine. You have a symptom, we give you a specific medication at a specific dosing to basically cover up that symptom. We're not getting to the bottom of it, because when you look at the biggest symptoms right now in our midst are, diabetes or sugar dysregulation, elevated lipids or cholesterol, elevated blood pressure. These are the kinds of, we call them diseases in this country, but they're not diseases, they're symptoms. And there's something underlying that's deeper, that's causing these symptoms. And in functional medicine, we get to the root cause of the symptoms and we fix it instead of just covering up with Band-Aids.
Yeah. That's very needed nowadays. So I have a question there. You described what functional medicine is. I think a lot of people have that question. It sounds just kind of very broad, and I think to some people it may be nebulous, right? But if we were to summarize it, functional medicine is exactly as you described it, which is we are looking at your body as a whole. We're looking at all the different systems, all the different components, and we understand that they do not operate independent of each other, right? They all have their unique functions, their unique outputs, their unique requirements, but they are all interdependent. It is 100% integrated, right? So functional medicine is treating the body exactly as it really is, as it's meant to be treated, which is as a whole. And you mentioned one word, which I think is very important, which is healing. And there's a connotation there, which is going back to its original condition, right? We want to go back to its original condition. And so, and in order to go back to the original condition, you have to go to the root of things. Yeah. And because we're going to the root of things, we're then required to confront the reality of the solution. When you get to the root of something, you can then formulate a sustainable solution, something that will actually treat or lead to healing, right? And healing is a process.
Correct.
It doesn't just happen overnight, right? It's a process. So because all these things are true, it sounds like there has to be quite a bit of participation and buy-in from the patient. They have to be part of that process, right? They have to do the work, like you did the work, right? And you have to also trust the process, because you're not going to see results overnight. So would you say that these presumptions are accurate?
100% true. 100% true. So, and in order to put together my business, I mean, I created programs. Like you said, this doesn't happen overnight. This doesn't happen with one visit and then we'll do a follow-up in 6 months. It just doesn't work like that. So I have 3 and 5 month packages where I work with patients. And in order to formulate those packages, I went and studied. I actually did some research on what is transformation, what makes people transform, what motivates them to transform. Because in all honesty, I'm not a healer in the sense that I can't heal you, right? I can work on healing myself. I can't heal you or fix you. And I make sure that patients understand that when they come to me. We're going to do this together. I'm going to guide you, and you are going to do the healing yourself. But you're not by yourself. Like I said, I studied transformation, and what I learned is in order to transform, you need 4 things. One, you need a purpose or a goal, right? You have to know what you want, whether it's to beat this cancer, to lose 40 pounds, to get on the floor and play with my grandchildren and be able to get up and down without using my hands, to run a Boston Marathon, whatever it is, whatever your goal or purpose is, you have to have one, right? And then you have to have high stakes. There has to be something at stake that if you do not accomplish this, it's not good, like you're about, you've got a cancer diagnosis. And if you don't get on board with this, you're going to wind up with a poor prognosis. Or you've got an autoimmune condition, you could have a poor prognosis. Money could be on the line. You might pay for this, and it might be your last dime that you put towards it. And that's high stakes. Whatever it is, that's high stakes. Then you need a container, because there needs to be a time frame. You can't just leave it open-ended and say, well, when it happens, it happens. I'll help you. No, it has to be like, this is going to be 3 months. This is going to be 5 months. This is going to be 6 months. This is a plan. And the fourth piece, which is the most important, is you need personal contact. You can't do it yourself. I didn't do it myself, and I don't expect anyone to do it themselves. We have to have coaching. We have to have someone cheering us on, and that's really important. And so what I've created is a package that brings all of these 4 things together so that the transformation can take place. And that's why what I do, it's not just run-of-the-mill healthcare. It does include medical care, and I am a prescriber, so I can write prescriptions if you need them. But the most important piece is actually the coaching and the being there by the side of that patient and cheering them on and reminding them, like what you just said, these symptoms and dysfunction don't come on overnight. They're not going to go away overnight. It requires patience. It requires some time. It's not a quick fix at all. And so just to have someone there reminding you, I give my patients 24/7 access to me. That's part of what they buy into, because it's that important.
So what would you tell the person that hears you and, is logically grasping what you're saying? You mentioned before, we're living in a world where we are not sleeping as much as we should. We're overcommitted. And the process we're talking about here requires commitment and requires effort and requires time. What would you say is the main obstacle for some people to take that leap into that journey and commit to the process? And how can we encourage them to move forward? Because I imagine that maybe, it- number one problem is I don't take care of myself. I don't spend the time to take care of myself. My calendar is booked. The kids have soccer and volleyball and this responsibility, and it's tax season. It's always something, right? So how can we encourage people to take that step?
It's about motivation and self-motivation. You have to be ready. It's not for the faint of heart. It's for someone who is really, really ready. Like I am sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. I like to call it FLC syndrome, feels like crap syndrome. I think Dr. Mark Hyman used that term the first time, and I thought it was great. But you have to be done with it, and you have to want to move on at whatever cost. I've heard all kinds of excuses. I don't have the time. I don't have the money. I'm just not ready to give up my Diet Cokes, or whatever it is, or my regular Cokes, or my birthday cake, or eating chocolate, whatever it is. I've heard it all. And it's just a matter of really prioritizing your health and realizing that if you don't pay now, you pay later. Like, do you want to be that person that all of a sudden gets a cancer diagnosis or autoimmune diagnosis or has a heart attack or a stroke? And then you're not going to have a choice about your calendar or your money or anything else. You're just going to be having to focus 100% on trying to heal. And it's a lot harder to heal when something acute like that happens than when you're in the chronic state. The healing is a lot easier.
I think there's one topic that I definitely want to talk about, which you also touched on a little bit earlier when you were introducing everybody to your story and your journey, which is the idea of the biological clock. I think a lot of people would be interested. This may be compelling for some people to get started, right? Um, you didn't start your path to healing with the intention of turning back your biological clock. It sounds like you just did your research, you made the changes that you felt like you needed to make that were important to make, to optimize your health. And, fast forward, we were measuring certain parameters. We were looking at some metrics, some objective data, and it turns out you turned your biological clock back 14 years, which is, from how I understand it, absolutely spectacular, right? Not 1 year, not 2 years, but 14 years. Let's talk a little bit about that. Number one, what does that even mean? What does it mean to turn back your biological clock? Let's tell the people what that means.
So our chronological age is how we normally count age from the day we were born. So we look at our birthdays. So my chronological age is 61 and a half. I was born in 1963, so 61 and a half years old. Biological age is measured, and it can be measured different ways. The way mine's been measured is through an algorithm of different markers. They're mostly inflammatory markers that look at how the body is managing stress and how inflamed the body is and how much difficulty the body has with some of the most important processes like detoxification, and how much risk there is for things like cardiovascular events, oxidative stress, things like that stress the body and cause us to age faster than we should. Those all represent, the propensity for DNA damage, which is what makes us age. It's our DNA. And the most effective and efficient way to measure biological age is by looking at the telomeres, which are the little end caps of our DNA strands. And those actually get measured. That's not how mine was done. I believe that test is very, very difficult to find, number one, and extremely expensive, number two. And honestly, I probably set my biological clock even further, because I'm pretty sure when I started this journey, I was probably 10 or 15 years older than my chronological age. So I didn't measure it until I was already on the path, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, so you can measure biological age with labs. There's different labs that do it. Like I said, I was late to the game. I've been following mine for about 3 years now, but the gap between chronological and biological age for me has actually extended. The first time I did it, it was 10 years off, and then the next year it was 12 years younger, and now the most recent one I did was 14 years younger. So even though I'm growing a year older every year chronologically, I've pushed my biological clock back too.
Yeah,
So
that sounds like the chronological age it's not like it plateaus. The progress you can make
no,
is outpace your chronological age, can outpace your biological aging.
yeah. Yeah, you can really reverse aging. And
Yeah.
it's really, again, it's probably a simplified way of calling it, when we say biological age versus chronological age, it's not a perfect,
Yeah.
marker, but I think it's nice to track it, and see what it does year after year. At least you're comparing it against itself, which tells me that my health continues to improve, which I'm very happy with. I do know someone in her 70s who claims that her biological age was in her 20s,
Well,
which I think is incredible. She's also been on bioidentical hormone therapy for about 40 years. So
oh, wow. Okay.
yeah,
Very interested about that. The research shows it's primarily the lifestyle
yeah,
changes in environment, right?
yeah,
What works in our environment that will have the biggest impact on that. And so I kind of want to talk about that a little bit too. So now that we understand what that means, biological age versus chronological age, can you talk to us about some of the specific changes, alterations, transformations you made in your life that had the biggest impact on it, or that continue to have the biggest impact, and what you learned along the way, like what adjustments you made along the way?
yes. And I will say it's definitely a journey, not a race. And I am
Yeah.
still on the journey. Matter of fact, I'm in the middle of a detox from a very specific mold I found out that has been harbored in my body for probably a very long time, because it's a mold that comes specifically from corn and wheat, which I haven't eaten either of in years and years. So it's probably been in there a very long time. But yeah, when I started, probably the very beginning, it was mostly dietary by accident, believe it or not. My son had a health issue and was advised to go on specific dietary, very non-inflammatory, like low allergy, low histamine, low sensitivity diet. And he was in his late teens or early 20s. And of course, like any good mama, I said, well, if you got to do it, I'm going to do it. We're going to do it together, because he was distraught. He's like, how am I going to go? He was in college at the time. How am I going to go back to school and eat like this? It was no root vegetables, no gluten, no dairy. It was like a big no list. No sugar. bunch of stuff on there. So no peanuts, no cashew, all kind of things on it. Anyway, I said, I'll do it with you. And at that time, I hadn't even really started my journey yet. But just from doing that with him and had taken a lot of these inflammatory foods out of my diet, I started feeling a little bit better. That was the beginning for me when I started feeling a little better. And I thought, oh my goodness, wow, this is incredible. And that's when that's when the ball really started rolling for me. So it got kicked off with that diet. So the very first thing for me was dietary changes, and they were blind, meaning I didn't do any testing. I just kind of eliminated a bunch of inflammatory foods from the diet. And then when I saw the chiropractor, the nurse practitioner in the chiropractor's office, she had me take a few more things out of my diet. She said, well, you're doing okay, but I would recommend eliminating, I think it was grains and legumes at the time, legumes and beans, like all grains. I had been gluten-free, but not grain-free. And I took those out of my diet and noticed a big difference. So that was the beginning for me, the dietary changes. And then slowly everything else came along. Then when I learned more about functional medicine, I did some testing, because in functional medicine, we test, we don't guess. That's the goal. And I realized I had a heavy metal toxicity. I had very high mercury levels, so I needed to detox from the mercury. I had some mercury fillings from when I was a kid. I did some research and found out that I had grown up. The neighborhood I grew up with was built over an old coal mine, which is where a lot of those heavy metals probably came from. The coal mine closed in 1959, and my parents bought the house above it in 1961 in a lovely new neighborhood they built. And believe it or not, you'll believe it when I tell you that a lot of people from that old neighborhood are either sick or dead. Most of the people my age, there's a lot of autoimmune disease, there's a lot of cancer, a lot of people are very sick and struggling. And it's probably because of that history. So it's really important to know your history. And that's one of the other things we dig into deep with functional medicine is the history, where you come from. We look at things like that. Where did you grow up? Do you know much about the area? So I did the testing and found out I had heavy metals. So I did detox from that, which made a big difference. I did some gut testing and realized I had a couple of infections that needed to be taken care of, which I did. I cleaned out my gut. And now I'm doing this mold detox. And I'm also doing a lot more with hormones. I'm learning a lot about bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. I have, in addition to my certification in functional medicine, I do have a certification in women's health and hormones. And I'm in the process of another course specifically on bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. So constantly growing, and I practice what I preach. And I preach what I practice. As I'm going along and I learn things, and then I bring it to my patients. And it's just a never-ending journey of health and trying to get to the right place.
I like the idea that in functional medicine, we're not just documenting or considering subjective reporting from the patient. We're collecting data, objective data points to make decisions, right? So we talked about some lab testing. Can you tell us a little bit more about the type of testing that you do in your practice and when you do it? Like at what point are we doing this kind of testing? Yeah.
Absolutely. Again, I believe tests don't guess. So we are constantly, I don't work with anybody who doesn't have some tests to go on. There's not much we can do without doing some testing. So as a minimum, I like to do a basic lab panel from one of the general labs, like LabCorp Request. And I will say that it's important to understand that when you look at general labs, like from your primary care or from a specialist, when they order labs from Quest or LabCorp, those lab ranges that you see on the reports that they call normal ranges, they're not really normal. What they are is average. They get those ranges by looking at the average population that tests for those markers and where they fall. And that's why they've changed over time. A1Cs have crept up over time. Now, we used to diagnose diabetes at a much lower A1C. Now it's suddenly creeping up higher for prediabetes and diabetes. We have this threshold like, well, most people are pretty much, borderline diabetic. So let's move the markers up because they're average. They're not normal. So when we look at labs in functional medicine, we look with a functional eye, and we look instead of at the quote normal or even average markers, which is what we're seeing. We look at our functional optimal levels, and we have a different view of labs. I do order a big LabCorp panel. It's way beyond anything a traditional primary care would order. There's probably, 50 to 60, maybe even 70 markers on it. Like we don't it's not just TSH to evaluate your thyroid, which tells us nothing about thyroid function. We have a panel that measures, 9 or 10 markers for your thyroid. And as far as lipids, it's not just the usual 5 marker panel. I'm looking at lipoproteins, and I'm looking at nuclear molecular resonance, which is, it's probably 20 markers just to look at the cholesterol, because we now know that cholesterol is not an indication of cardiovascular disease. We have to dig a lot deeper and look not just at the level of the cholesterol, but the number of particles and how dense the particles are. And there's a little bit of a genetic component in there. And it gives us a lot more information to do deeper labs. We look at nutrient deficiencies like vitamin D and B and magnesium and some of the more important nutrients. And I do sugar panels that include the A1C, but I also look at fasting insulin, which is something most primary cares don't look at. Insulin resistance presents way before diabetes. So it can be a precursor and a big warning sign years before diabetes presents. And it gives us a chance to, stave it off, cut it off and heal that, fix it, get rid of it before it becomes a problem. So that's the kind of big panel I would do at LabCorp or Quest. That's part of my practice. And then I do more functional labs, which involve either hair samples, saliva, urine, feces, blood, all different modalities. And we look for things like toxicities, food sensitivities, what's going on in the gut, what the microbiome looks like. We look at metabolites like organic acids that tells us how our body's detoxing and what kinds of nutrient deficiencies or detox obstacles we might have, or toxicities. We look at the Dutch, which is a dried urine test of comprehensive hormones, which looks at hormones all along the HPA axis, which goes from the brain to our adrenal glands and also includes our sex hormone production. That's a really good tool to see hormone balance. It looks at what our adrenals are producing and ovaries, testes, and the stimulating hormones from the brain. So that gives us a complete report as well. So it's not one size fits all. We talk to the patient, we get a feel for where their areas are that need work, and we can pick a lab that's the most important. Gut is always a good place to start when you're not sure, because with autoimmune and cancer and a lot of these, inflammatory chronic kind of conditions that have labels on them, they often start in the gut. We're now even finding a connection to ADHD and autism and all kinds of things.
So we know that, one of the most obvious changes and one of the lifestyle changes that has one of the biggest impacts is our diet, our nutrition. What we are putting in our bodies, what our body is using as fuel, and energy has one of the biggest impacts. So after a series of testing, the type of testing that you just described, what are some of the other major changes, more broadly speaking, right? I know it's going to be unique to each person, but overall, like, what are some other major changes that you are advocating with your patients after looking at a lot of this data, in addition to dietary changes?
Yeah. And our modern diet today, it looks less and less like food than ever.
Yes.
It's really, a lot of it is not food. And so I pretty much tell everybody universally across the board, you've got to get the sugar out of the diet. There's sugar in everything. I mean, everything. If you start reading labels, it's in your sauce, your like pasta sauce, salsa, even broths. I just saw some in Whole Foods, a container of guacamole, and I read the label, there was sugar in it. Guacamole. I mean, it's crazy. So that's one of the first conversations we have, is you got to get the sugar out of the diet.
Yeah.
And not far behind it are the inflammatory seed oils, the safflower oil, the sunflower oil, the canola oil. Those are very inflammatory oils, especially when they're heated. And they're just plaguing our diet. And then it's the refined grains, the processed and highly processed foods, which are mostly grain based. And any of the, fried foods, fast foods, processed foods, they're full of chemicals. If you read labels and pay attention to what's in the ingredients, a lot of the words you can't even recognize. And I always say, if you can't pronounce it, or it's not something that your grandmother would have had in her pantry, or you don't have it in your pantry yourself, you probably shouldn't be eating it. And I always say, stay on the perimeter of the supermarket, stay out of the lanes, out of the aisles, because everything in there is packaged. If it's packaged in plastic and aluminum and even the packaging is toxic. I mean, it's almost impossible to get away from plastic. There's no doubt about it. But if you stay out of you stay on the perimeter, you have a better shot at it.
Yeah.
Buy the
And it
fresh food.
makes your trip a lot quicker too,
Yeah, and
you
buy the
know?
fresher food, the food
Yeah.
that's closest
And out,
to nature. Yep,
secret
in
lab.
its closest natural form, and, make it yourself at home, or even the prepared foods. Buy foods that are well prepared with good ingredients and good processes. And
Yeah.
even when you're selecting, your meats or whatever, you want the animals that are closest to nature, the ones that are pasture raised, that have not had a stressful life in commercial farming industry, because all those stress hormones that those animals produce, you're eating them when you eat commercially produced animals, and you're eating their poor feed, their poor grain fed diet, and they're often injected with hormones and antibiotics and all kinds of things. So stick to the pastured, naturally raised animals. Lamb is a safe one, and sheep and goat, and all the game animals, and certainly beef if it's grass fed. If you're looking for pasture raised and wild caught, these are all what you want to look
Yep.
for. I do have a guide to cleaning out your pantry on Facebook, and
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. I mean, a
yeah,
lot of people
it's
don't even,
it's
like you
pinned at the
mentioned.
top of my Facebook page if you go to my Midlife Midwife Functional Health, and it's I was live 5 days in a row from Safeway, and
Yeah.
right here in Northern Virginia, and
Yeah.
I walked around the supermarket each day and talked about different area of the supermarket and the products you should not have in your basket and the products you should put in your basket. And then there's a 5-page little handout that I made. It's a little rinky dink handout, but it's 5 pages and it's good information about what to include, what not to include, ingredients to look for on the label. It's a pretty good guide.
Yeah.
And I also want to stress, because I know it sounds extreme, but I don't believe in extremes. Once you're healed and you're healthy, I believe you can let your guard down a little. But while you're on the therapeutic journeys, there's two parts to the journey. There's the therapeutic part where you're healing and trying to get there. And then there's
Yeah.
once you're healed and you're much better, you could consider yourself well. That's a different part of the journey. We look for more sustainable measures that you can live with daily. I'm not a crazy, insane, excessive taking a million supplements every single day of my life and not having any fun and never going out to dinner. That's not me. I believe that once you get to where you can be healthy and well, you can live your life. You can go out to a restaurant, you can order your favorite dish, but the problem is that we've gone through such toxicity and so much overload that our body just needs to like detox and heal before you can get there. And then once you're there, it's easier to sustain, because if you have discretions only once in a while, I like to say the 80-20 rule or the 90-10 rule. For some people, it depends. I try to be really strict 90% of the time, and 10% of the time it's a party.
Yeah.
But it took me a long time to get here. I couldn't do that a while ago. It's definitely a journey. And it definitely requires you have to really be hungry for it and really want to be healthy.
I think that's a very important point for people to consider and to understand. It's that I think a lot of us may be under the impression that if we go down this route, all the fun ends.
Yeah, no.
Can't
You
go
can check
out.
out my Facebook page. You'll see me at the wineries.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think people need to understand that's like, no, you can still, let's go through the healing process. Kind of like any wound that's
Yeah.
healing. It's like going to be certain restrictions that we're going to stick to for a certain period of time. Let the thing heal, right? Don't expose it to the sun. Don't do this. Don't do that. There's going to be a list of do nots for a period of time. Let's stick to it, stick to the process. And then, once we're healed, let's revisit,
Yeah.
some of the things that we can reintroduce mildly or in moderation. And, then you get uh, the best of both worlds, let's say, right? The from day to day, you're feeling like yourself. You're feeling better than you ever did, better than you knew you could, right? Which I think is amazing. Once people start experiencing, it's like, oh my gosh, I thought that was my baseline. Like
Yeah.
this is my baseline. Get to the new baseline and then reintroduce these things. It's like you're not. You don't have to be the boring person at the party all day. You'll be good. You know what I mean? I've made a lot of lifestyle changes over the last few years. And before I kicked it off, I was always under the impression, I was like, okay, well, there goes that part of my life, like the fun part of it, right? I was like, but this is more worth it. And it was a myth. It's not true.
Right.
And so I think it was discouraging to get started. because of that myth, right? Is that you have to give up certain social aspects of your life, let's say that may be associated with whatever it is that you are giving up for, a certain amount of time. But
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I would definitely encourage people to dig a little deeper on that and kick off with that journey.
Yeah, it's
So
so different. It's so different than like being put in a cast for a broken leg, right? I mean, it's a period of time. You're going to be in this cast for 3 months. Okay, so no, no skateboarding or biking while you're in the cast, and you might think it's the worst thing in the world, but then the cast is going to come off, and you're going to rehab, and you might not go back to everything you used to do, but you will have a great life,
yeah,
and it's the same thing. It's just like
you don't
any
desire those things anymore, right?
right.
Like once you lay off the sugar, let's say for a really long time,
Yeah, yeah.
the cravings start to go away.
The
These
cravings
things,
absolutely go away.
and then you're also experiencing all of the advantages, and then you're like, I don't even want that. I don't want the cake
Yeah,
anymore, right? It's not worth it.
right.
Like it's so fleeting in its
Yeah.
satisfaction. To well, I mean, this was great, and to close us off, if you're to consolidate, a message to the people out there that want to hear this and need to hear this, what's your, what's your final message to the people out there?
It's not your fault. We are living in a toxic world, but it is your responsibility. If you want to take your life back, you got to take your life back. Like, do it. Get motivated and fight back against this toxic world we live in, and decide you want to get healthy and take the measures to do it. And if you need guidance, look me up. I'm here to help. And there's so much out there today with information. And there's also a lot of noise. So be careful who you listen to. Follow people that are reputable and that have results. And like, don't wait, because life is too good and you just never know. We all have cancer cells that live in our body all the time. And our immune system keeps them at bay. It's when we get overloaded that cancer starts to form, and we don't know about the cancer for years, sometimes months to years. So that could be going on in your body right now. And if you want the best insurance policy against that, it's about strengthening your body, healing, strengthening that immune system, and being as healthy as possible.
Yeah, great. Don, hey, quick question: do you see patients virtually at all?
I do. I have two offices, actually. I'm in Leesburg in person on Thursdays, and I have an office now in Tysons on Wednesdays, and the rest of the week is virtual.
So Leesburg, Virginia, and Tyson's Corner, Virginia. And if people wanted to continue this conversation with you and find you online, where do they look?
MidlifeMidwifeFH.com. And I do free events every month in each location.
Okay, so I'll get that information from you, the details on that,
Yeah.
and then we can post it and let people know in case they're interested. So again, it's midlifemidwifefh.com.
Yeah.
Yes, FH for functional health,
Yeah.
correct?
Midlife
Making
Midwife Functional Health. If you Google that, you'll find me too.
Okay, great. And again, today we were joined by Donna Figueroa. She's a functional medicine nurse practitioner and founder of Midlife Midwife Functional Health. Donna, I really enjoyed our conversation today. I think it was full of extremely valuable insights, stuff that you experienced yourself, and you're putting it out there for other people to start taking a similar path to vitality and optimized health. So we really appreciate all the work that you're doing out here and enriching the lives of the people that are coming in contact with you. So thank you so much, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Bass, and thanks to everyone out there. Hope to see you soon.
Don, it was a pleasure. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.